And Don, where I want to start, I mean, there's so many parts to this story that affect Magna directly and indirectly. And I want to get to what now feels like an old part of the story to me, which is your operations in China, because I know that that's relevant. But I just want to back up. And as a major employer of a major business in Canada, of a hugely important industry, just high level, I want to know what's happening with Magna right now, what these last few weeks have been like for you.
Well, we're all getting very good at working at home. As you know, the automotive industry is a major driver of the economy, because you've got the automakers, the parts makers, all the subsequent suppliers, transportation industry, material dealerships. So it's a huge interconnected industry, and it's global. So when we first saw this going down in China, that was affecting the supply lines. China is, for the most part, back up and running now. But Europe has been down almost entirely across the board now with the assembly plants. In North America, Mexico just shutting down. North America is essentially down now, I think, for about the month of April at least.
So just in terms of, let's go back to China then. We saw supply shut down. And I know that you were hard at work in the middle of all of that, kind of managing through it. If it's up and running, is there any point to having it operating if your global sales have ground to a halt? How do the pieces fit together here?
Well, if you look, Magna is a public company and we're global. So we have roughly 70,000 people between Canada, US, and Mexico, relatively equally split. About 70,000 in Europe, and the balance of 165,000 are over in Asia, mainly China. So having China come up, it certainly helps. I mean, it's part of our business running. But it's good to see China coming up, I'd say, more from a lessons learned standpoint. So they did a lockdown. It was effective. Hopefully we're doing the same things here, and we're being consistent across Europe and North America. But now that they are coming out of it, and they've got the protocols to come back to work safely, and I can talk more about that in a minute, it's good to see at least they can get the economy rolling again. So it helps part of our business, but they'll also start building the supply chain back to the other districts of the world. So we need to be very cooperative and very organized if we want to bring the industry back up running, probably first in Europe and then followed hopefully closely by North America. But if you look at it, everybody's worried about their own personal health and what happens, and we're learning every day. But it looks like China has come back to more normal circumstances. So hopefully we can do the same thing here.
And I mean, you're obviously learning on the fly, but in terms of your own production, as you look across, as you say, in this kind of rolling way across the world to restart production lines, can you practice social distancing and still start a production line?
Well, we're probably pretty typical, although we're pretty integrated and pretty large globally. We've had people working 12, 14 hours a day. We have about 20 work streams going on. I've got a copy of it here. You can't see it. I won't go through it all, but that's sort of the list. The first one is make sure we're dealing with the virus facts. So what's going on? Everybody hears different information. There's all sorts of things over social media. So we have a doctor here and he's coordinating. So let's get the virus facts. The second work stream is let's make sure our employees are safe. And I think all companies will be looking at that. We have work from home policy. A lot of our operations are shut down, but we have a lot of operations still going on, either for critical things we need to do to get our plants ready to come back up, or they're involved in making what we call PPE, or personal protective equipment. So and I just want to put a shout out to all the employees at Magna and the other people who are still working through this difficult time in a safe manner. But it's critical we keep the important things running, not just the medical and the food and everything else. We need to get our economy back working when the time is right. So that's the second area. The third major area is, and we're getting really good cooperation here across the industry in Europe, in North America, with all the industry players coming together to say, when we get back to work, how are we going to do it safely? So what are the protocols? How are people going to have distancing? What is factually the right thing to do? We just finished a call on something called CAPSI, the Canadian Automotive Partnership Council. We had the governments, the provincial, federal, all the car companies, all the suppliers, the dealerships, Jerry Dias from Unifor's on there, talking about how we're going to get the Canadian economy started as well, safely, but we need to get back to work at some point in time.
And you mentioned the personal protective equipment. I know Magna has been tapped to help with that. Can you just give me a snapshot of what it is that you're able to do?
Sure, it's a long list, quite frankly, about what's going on. There's activities in the U.S. to make ventilators. There's activities in North America to make ventilators. The government has been involved. I've been in calls personally with Premier Ford. Linda Hasenfratz actually has taken the lead on the ventilator production with a couple of companies in Ontario. So everybody's looked at what can they make. The industry's coming together. We're also doing the same thing on making face shields and gowns, protective gowns, and masks. Other N95, we're trying to source them with our suppliers. We're trying to figure out how to make masks. So there's a lot of different work streams and what's going on there. We're also trying to predict at what point in time does the industry come back up? What is the best practice? Let's make sure we're dealing with medical facts so that employees, rightly so, if they're going to go back to work, they want to know what we're doing for tracing and protocols and keeping people healthy and what testing would we have to do. So I think there's some really good discussions and cooperation going on amongst everybody in the industry to try and make sure that we're consistent and get people back safely. But we also have to make sure we do get the economy going again, because the impact this is going to have on individuals and companies and small companies and right down our supply chain line, even large companies, and quite frankly, the balance sheets of the government. So we need to somehow figure out the most efficient and safe way to get the country rolling again.